A rare public address from the White House, First Lady Melania Trump today denied allegations she had a close relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and his associate Ghislaine Maxwell. Our White House correspondent Liz Landers joins us now with more. So Liz, what did the First Lady say?
This was an extraordinary statement from a First Lady that we rarely see have this kind of public statement. She spoke for just 6 minutes or so from the grand foyer there in the White House, and she distanced herself from Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. Listen to some of what she said.
I've never had any knowledge of Epstein abuse of his victims. I was never involved in any capacity. I was not a participant, was never on Epstein's plane, and never visited his private island.
Hey gang, it's Adam. Let's jump straight in. Melania Trump issued a formal statement denying Epstein ties and calling for congressional hearings with survivor testimony, while a $75 million documentary centered on her story premiered at a Trump-branded venue. Combined with her explicit claim of independence and occasional disagreement with her husband, the pattern signals a First Lady deliberately stepping out of the traditional role. That statement of independence, combined with a surprise Epstein statement that Trump publicly claimed he did not know about, combined with a $75 million documentary centered on her brand rather than his, combined with the First Lady calling for congressional Epstein hearings, while the administration is managing exactly that congressional fight. This is the picture of a First Lady who is operating with a degree of independence from her husband's political interests that is genuinely unusual in modern American political history. Whether that independence reflects genuine autonomy, strategic positioning, or some combination of the two, it is producing real political complications for Trump at one of the most politically pressured moments of his second term.
There was a remarkable moment at the White House, Adrian. The First Lady, Melania Trump, delivered a statement that seemingly came out of the blue. She called on Congress to hold open public hearings for the victims of the Epstein files and distanced herself from Jeffrey Epstein.
I never had a relationship with Epstein or his accomplice, Maxwell. I am not Epstein's victim. Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump. The first time I crossed paths with Epstein was in the year 2000 at an event Donald and I attended together. At the time, I had never met Epstein and had no knowledge of his criminal undertakings.
What prompted this remains unclear, but she did say online smears are reaching the point of defamation. This puts the Epstein files back into focus when the White House so desperately wants it to go away.
Let us go through the specific pieces because the Epstein statement and the documentary are each substantive enough to deserve their own careful analysis before we look at how they connect. Let us start with the Epstein statement because the specific content of what Melania said goes further than a personal denial and has direct political implications for the congressional and administrative Epstein accountability fight. Melania's formal statement published on the official White House website did several distinct things simultaneously. It denied personal connection to Epstein. She never flew his plane, never visited his island, never had a relationship with him or Maxwell. It attacked the people spreading the rumors, accusing mean-spirited and politically motivated individuals of spreading false smears for money and politics. And it called for congressional action, specifically a public hearing centered on Epstein survivors with sworn testimony entered into the congressional record. That third element is the one that is politically most consequential and most unusual.
I never been friends with Epstein.
In a rare address from the White House on Thursday, First Lady Melania Trump denied ever having ties to disgraced financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, reviving a highly volatile issue that her husband has repeatedly sought to downplay.
Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump.
She did not say why she chose to speak out now, as the Epstein saga had largely receded from the headlines amid the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran. A spokesperson for the First Lady said the president's aides were made aware of her plans for Thursday's statement.
I am not Epstein's victim.
She also said she was not a victim of Epstein's abuse, but urged Congress to provide public hearings for those who were.
Give these victims their opportunity to testify under oath in front of Congress with the power of sworn testimony. Each and every woman should have her day to tell her story in public if she wishes.
The administration she is part of has been managing the Epstein file situation in ways that the House Oversight Committee and multiple watchdog organizations have all been examining for accountability. The congressional investigation into the Epstein files is ongoing, and the First Lady just called for more congressional hearings on Epstein with survivor testimony. That is not the direction the White House political operation wanted the Epstein conversation to go. It is the direction that congressional Democrats and advocacy organizations have been pushing. And Melania just added her voice from the official White House website to that push. The did he know or not question is the piece that produced the most immediate political chaos in the days after the statement. Reports indicated that Trump told a host on a major network that he did not know anything about Melania's statement before it aired. That is a specific and notable claim. A sitting president publicly distancing himself from a formal statement issued through official White House communications channels by his own wife. If the statement had been unauthorized, if Melania genuinely acted without Trump's knowledge in issuing a formal statement from the White House website calling for Epstein congressional hearings, it would be an extraordinary breach of administration communications protocol and would represent a genuinely unilateral action by the First Lady that contradicted the administration's desired Epstein narrative management.
She pushed back on what she says are numerous fake images and statements about her relationship with Epstein. There is one real photograph of Melania and Donald Trump photographed together with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And also the Department of Justice released an email exchange between Melania Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell. She said that that email should not be considered anything more than a trivial note. And I should add, Jeff, that Melania Trump has never been accused of any wrongdoing in connection with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
What about the timing, though? Why is this happening now?
I reached out to the First Lady's office to ask them this. We did not hear back from them. President Trump himself was asked by a MS Now reporter if he knew about this. He said he didn't know anything about the statement prior to it happening, which is also rather extraordinary. We don't know what prompted the First Lady's statement today. However, the First Lady and the journalist Michael Wolff have been involved in a legal back and forth over some reporting that he has said about her and Epstein. Melania Trump's lawyer sent him a letter to demand that he retract and apologize for linking Melania to Epstein. In response, he sued her last year, saying that she was threatening to file $1 billion lawsuit against him in an attempt to intimidate him.
But then, an unnamed aide for the First Lady told a major newspaper that Trump was aware of her plan, suggesting that the "I did not know anything" claim was itself either false or misleading. Other major news outlets noted that Melania's move prompted bafflement inside Washington, with reporters asking why she chose to speak and whether the president had approved it. The split between Trump's public claim of ignorance and her office's insistence he was not blindsided is itself a political fact that adds to the complexity. Either Trump's White House is issuing formal statements he claims not to know about, or he was aware and is publicly distancing himself from the statement's content for political reasons. Neither option is a particularly comfortable one for an administration trying to manage the Epstein narrative. The content of the Epstein statement connects directly to the broader Epstein accountability story in ways that make it politically more charged than a simple personal denial. Melania said Epstein was not alone, implicitly acknowledging that there are others whose connections to Epstein should be examined, and specifically called for a hearing where survivors could testify with sworn testimony entered into the congressional record. That specific demand, sworn testimony in the congressional record, is the most powerful form of congressional accountability because it creates a permanent, legally significant record that cannot simply be managed away through press releases or administration talking points. Melania's call for that specific format on the official White House website adds institutional legitimacy to the demand that congressional Democrats have been making for exactly the same thing. The administration's Epstein narrative strategy had been to characterize the file releases as transparency and the ongoing inquiries as politically motivated harassment. Melania's call for congressional hearings with survivor sworn testimony cuts against every element of that strategy because it uses the platform of the White House itself to endorse the kind of accountability process the administration has been resisting. The documentary is the second major piece, and it tells a different but related story about Melania's relationship to the Trump political operation. Reports indicate that the film follows the days around Trump's return to the White House and is meant to show what it is like to transition from private citizen back to First Lady. A major newspaper reported that the corporation paid approximately $40 million for distribution rights and committed another $35 million for marketing, a total of $75 million for a First Lady-centric documentary. Critics were saying the spending was partly about currying favor with Trump, suggesting that the corporation's extraordinary investment in the documentary about the First Lady was influenced by a corporate calculation about the value of a positive relationship with the Trump administration. That financial context is significant on its own. The corporate money represents the monetization of the White House platform in ways that raise serious questions. The First Lady's office is a platform of the executive branch. When that platform is used to produce content that a corporation pays $75 million to distribute and market, the line between public role and private enrichment is at minimum blurry. The premiere at the venue bearing Trump's name adds another layer to the brand picture. The event featured heavy Melania branding, a black carpet walk with senior White House and GOP officials in attendance. Various outlets noted that the premiere effectively turned a personal branding project into a semi-official state-adjacent event. The Melania documentary is simultaneously a personal commercial project generating significant private income, a political communications product shaping the First Lady's public image, and an event hosted at a venue renamed in her husband's honor, attended by government officials treated in press coverage as a White House event. Those overlapping categories, personal, commercial, political communication, government adjacent, official event, are the same categories that produce the accountability questions about other administration projects. The pattern of blurring the line between the Trump family's personal brand and the official institutions of the U.S. government is the through line that connects all of these stories. Melania's own public framing of her independence is worth taking seriously as a data point rather than dismissing as marketing language. The interview in which she said she does not always agree with her husband, and that is okay, combined with the surprise Epstein statement, the documentary, and the pattern of independent moves, suggests a First Lady who is genuinely pursuing her own agenda alongside, rather than simply in support of her husband's. Major news outlets have characterized her as unusually willing compared to past First Ladies to talk about not always agreeing with her husband and to take on sensitive topics in her own voice. That characterization is consistent with the pattern of behavior. The surprise Epstein statement that Trump claimed he did not know about, the documentary centered on her story rather than his, the independence framing in interviews. Whether that independence serves Trump's political interests, whether having a First Lady who publicly says she does not always agree with her husband and occasionally issues surprise statements calling for Epstein hearings, helps or hurts the political operation, is a question whose answer appears to be complicated at best. Let us be really clear about what Melania's two moves, the Epstein statement, and the documentary, mean for the Trump political situation. The first thing to understand is why the Epstein statement is specifically more politically damaging than if the same content had come from any other source. When congressional Democrats call for Epstein survivor hearings with sworn testimony in the congressional record, that is predictable partisan opposition that the administration can characterize as politically motivated. When watchdog organizations make the same demand, the administration can characterize it as advocacy group posturing. When the First Lady makes the same demand from the official White House website in a statement that Trump publicly claimed he did not know about before it aired, it is on the White House website. The administration cannot characterize its own website as a source of politically motivated harassment. The demand carries the institutional legitimacy of the White House platform, and every Democratic member of Congress who wants to press for Epstein hearings now has a White House statement as a citation for why those hearings are appropriate. Melania calling for Epstein congressional hearings from the White House website is the specific and politically significant outcome of a move that no communications team would have designed on purpose, which is probably why Trump said he did not know anything about it. The second layer worth sitting with is what the documentary deal and the premiere tell us about the financial and institutional dynamics of First Ladyhood under the current administration. The $75 million a corporation invested in a documentary about Melania is not purely a commercial decision based on anticipated audience interest. Critics specifically noted that the spending was partly about currying favor with Trump. That is a specific and significant framing. It means the corporation's calculation about how much to pay for and market a Melania documentary was influenced by its assessment of the corporate value of being seen as supportive of the Trump administration, which means the First Lady's platform is generating commercial income that is at least partly a function of her husband's political power, rather than purely of her personal commercial appeal. In that specific dynamic, first family members generating commercial income that reflects their proximity to the presidency, rather than purely their independent commercial value, is the same dynamic that produces the conflict of interest concerns about the family's other ventures and the other financial arrangements we have seen throughout this period. The third layer is the brand dynamics question, and what it means for Trump's political identity, that the most commercially successful product bearing the Trump name in this period is not the administration's signature projects. It is Melania, her documentary, her name, her branding at the premiere, her $75 million of corporate investment. Trump has always cast himself as the star of his family, of his business empire, of his political brand. Having the First Lady front a $75 million documentary with her name on the banners at a venue, effectively renamed in his honor, is a specific kind of brand dynamic that produces subtle tension. Two overlapping brands, one household. The Melania documentary is currently generating more favorable coverage and more commercial success than the administration's other signature moments. Now, to give the complete and fair picture, the administration and Melania's team have responses to both stories that deserve acknowledgement. On the Epstein statement, her team would argue that she is entitled to defend herself against false rumors that have been circulating about her for years, that the statement was a personal declaration rather than a political act, and that calling for victim hearings reflects genuine concern for justice, rather than calculated political disruption of the administration's Epstein narrative. On the documentary, the corporation's investment reflects the commercial value of a documentary about a compelling figure at a historic moment, rather than purely corporate favor-seeking. And Melania's right to pursue her own media and commercial projects independent of her husband's political agenda is a legitimate expression of the very independence she has claimed. These are real arguments. The right of a public figure to defend herself against false rumors is genuine. The right to pursue independent commercial projects is legitimate. Characterizing every move Melania makes as calculated political disruption of the administration imposes a conspiratorial coherence on what may simply be a complex person making decisions that serve her own interests and values without fully coordinating with the White House political operation. But here is what those arguments run into when you apply them to the specific political reality of the situation. The Epstein statement from the official White House website calling for congressional hearings with survivor sworn testimony is on the record regardless of Melania's intent. Every congressional Democrat who wants Epstein hearings can now cite it. The documentary's commercial terms, $40 million for distribution, $35 for marketing, are unusually large for a First Lady documentary and reflect calculations that include but go beyond pure commercial assessment. And the Trump-claimed ignorance, Aide said he knew contradiction is itself a documented political complication that adds to the Epstein narrative rather than resolving it. Whether or not any of these moves were calculated to create political complications for Trump, they have. In the specific combination of a surprise Epstein statement he publicly distanced himself from and a First Lady documentary that is outbranding his own celebration apparatus, an administration narrative is created that is harder to manage. Not easier because of Melania's independence. Here is the bottom line on all of this. Melania Trump delivered a surprise formal statement from the White House calling for congressional Epstein hearings with survivor sworn testimony, and Trump publicly claimed he did not know about it in advance, while her aide said he did. She simultaneously advanced a documentary for which a corporation paid $75 million total and that premiered at a venue bearing the Trump name with heavy Melania branding and senior White House attendance. She has publicly described herself as an independent First Lady who does not always agree with her husband. Her Epstein statement directly contradicts the administration's desired narrative of moving past the Epstein story by adding the institutional weight of the White House website to the call for more accountability. Her documentary is commercially outperforming the administration's other cultural projects, and the combination of the two moves, one pulling the Epstein spotlight back, one building the Melania brand at the administration's institutional expense, is what the unthinkable framing is capturing. Not that Melania did something illegal or constitutionally extraordinary, but that she did something genuinely unusual for a modern First Lady. She used the White House platform on her own terms in ways that created political complications for her husband, while building her own commercial and public profile in ways that may outlast his political moment. The political landscape shifted in ways that few anticipated when Melania stepped forward with that statement. The First Lady of the United States, someone who has largely remained in the background throughout her husband's political career, suddenly became the central figure in a story that her administration desperately wanted to put behind them. The Epstein connection has been a persistent headache for the Trump political operation, a lingering controversy that refuses to fade away. Every time they think they have managed to move past it, something new emerges to drag it back into the headlines. And now, the person who has injected new life into this controversy is the First Lady herself. Her call for congressional hearings with survivor testimony is not just a personal denial, it is a policy demand that puts her at odds with the administration's official position. It is a public declaration that the Epstein matter deserves more scrutiny, not less. And it is a statement that creates a new dynamic in Washington, where members of Congress now have a White House-sanctioned justification for pursuing the very investigations the administration has been resisting. The political calculation behind Melania's statement is difficult to discern. Perhaps she genuinely believes that survivors deserve their day before lawmakers. Perhaps she is seeking to distance herself from the Epstein Association for her own personal and commercial reasons. Perhaps she sees an opportunity to build her own independent brand and political identity separate from her husband. Whatever her motivations, the effect is the same. She has created a political headache for the administration at a moment when they can least afford one. The documentary component adds another layer of complexity to this already intricate situation. $75 million is a staggering amount of money for a documentary about any First Lady, let alone one whose public profile has been relatively subdued compared to her predecessors. The corporation's investment in this project raises questions about the intersection of commerce and politics in the Trump era. When a major corporation pays tens of millions of dollars to distribute and market a documentary about the First Lady, and does so at a time when it has other business interests before the administration, the appearance of favor-seeking is unavoidable. The premiere at the venue bearing Trump's name only heightens that perception, turning a commercial event into something that feels semi-official. A blending of private profit and public position that has become a hallmark of this administration's approach to governance. The black carpet premiere with senior White House officials in attendance transformed the event from a commercial screening into a political statement. It signaled that the administration was not just comfortable with the documentary, but actively supportive of it. And yet, if Trump was truly blindsided by his wife's Epstein statement, as he claimed, then there is a disconnect between the official support for her commercial project and the apparent lack of coordination on her political statement. This disconnect creates a picture of a First Lady who is operating independently, pursuing her own agenda, and occasionally catching her husband and his team off guard. Whether that independence is calculated or organic, it has become a defining feature of the current administration's internal dynamics. The brand dynamics are particularly noteworthy. For years, Trump has been the dominant figure in the Trump brand. His name, his image, his persona have been the driving force behind the family's commercial and political success. But now, his wife is emerging as a brand in her own right, one that is generating significant commercial interest and positive media coverage. The Melania documentary is currently outperforming the administration's other projects, attracting attention and investment that might otherwise have gone to Trump-centric initiatives. This represents a subtle but significant shift in the family's brand dynamics. The First Lady is no longer just a supporting figure, she is becoming a leading one. The implications of this shift extend beyond the current administration. If Melania continues to build her independent brand and political identity, she could emerge as a force in her own right with her own constituency and her own agenda. Her willingness to publicly disagree with her husband and to pursue her own initiatives suggests that she is not content to simply play the traditional role of First Lady. She wants to be seen as an independent actor, someone with her own thoughts and her own priorities. And she is using the White House platform to advance that vision, even when it creates complications for her husband's administration. The question of how Trump's team will respond to these developments is an open one. They cannot easily silence the First Lady or prevent her from making statements. They cannot stop her from pursuing commercial projects or building her own brand. They can try to manage the fallout, to spin the narrative in a way that minimizes the political damage. But the reality is that Melania has created a new dynamic that the administration must now contend with. She has shown that she is willing to act independently, to pursue her own agenda, and to publicly distance herself from her husband's positions when she sees fit. And that independence is likely to continue creating political complications for as long as she remains in the White House. The First Lady's office has always been a unique institution within the executive branch, occupying a space that is both public and private, official and personal. Melania is pushing the boundaries of that space further than any First Lady in recent memory. She is using her position to advance her own commercial interests, to make policy statements, and to build her own brand. And she is doing so in ways that sometimes contradict the interests of her husband's administration. This is unprecedented in modern American politics. It is also a reflection of the broader dynamics of this administration, where traditional boundaries between public office and private interest have been consistently blurred. Melania's independence, marked by her Epstein statement and documentary deal, signals she is building her own brand and agenda, with consequences for the administration. Whether this becomes a source of strength or internal conflict remains to be seen, but she is no longer content to simply stand by her man.